watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended. Today is Friday, April 2nd, and my name is Ryan Hulsebos. Thank you for joining us here for our fourth show of GLE, and we have a fairly large show planned. Lacrosse Flash writer Noah Landis will be joining me shortly. You probably know him better as PLL Chirps on Twitter. Noah will be joining me to talk about some of the recent activity going on in the PLL. We saw the Cannons make a handful of additions on Wednesday, including the addition of Super Bowl champion and ex-football player Chris Hogan through the waiver wire. They also traded midfielder Brent Adams and acquired attackman Andrew Q from the Redwoods. What do these moves mean for Coach Quirk's team going forward? We'll try to answer that question. And we'll also touch on the off seasons of the Redwoods, Atlas, Archers, Whipsnakes, and Chrome, and some names that could still be out there for the taking in the PLL player pool. And then Harrison Silcox will be joining me in a little bit as we look ahead to North Carolina Duke on Thursday night. We'll unfortunately be talking about the game before it plays, but we'll give some predictions on how we think that game will go. We'll also look ahead to the weekend in college lacrosse. We've got some Notre Dame, Syracuse action, Ohio State, Rutgers. Game 2 for TD Ierlan with number 5 Denver, and 2 top 20 matchups out of the Patriot League headlining this weekend's slate of games. In Whipsnakes face-off specialist, Joe Nardello will be joining me to close out today's show, a 2-time PLL champion and one of the best face-off specialists in the game. Make sure to stick around for that. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, Anchor, and a handful of other podcast platforms. You can follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links, as well as the Lacrosse Flash website and social media accounts, will be down below in the description. Make sure to follow Lacrosse Flash for all the latest news and updates. Mr. Landis, what's going on, my friend? Welcome to Goal Line Extended.
What's up? Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Hey, Wednesday, very, very busy day in the Premier Lacrosse League. The waiver wire officially opened on Tuesday. The teams announced those moves across social media. It looks like it was done in that kind of a snake style. If you go to the PLL website and go to the transactions, you can see that they got that they go in the order of the college draft with the Cannons with that number 1 selection. So pretty much just another draft as teams submitted their claims. Some teams made more moves than others. The Cannons ended up making 9 additions, while the Chaos 0 additions, as they made a few claims before the entry draft of players already in that player pool. Noah, let's talk about those Cannons. But let's go back to Monday first. Coach Quirk, maybe about an hour or so after completing an interview with me for this show, turned around and sent midfielder Brent Adams to the Atlas in exchange for a 4th-round pick in next year's college draft. We'll talk about how that move benefits the Atlas in a second. But Coach Quirk compiling picks here for the future, and then following the first round of waiver pickups, he acquired attackman Andrew Q from the Redwoods for the 24th overall pick in this year's college draft. That's a 3rd-round pick for a player that Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent picked up with the 4th waiver selection. We'll see how the Adams trade plays out for the Cannons when that 4th-round pick is used next season. But Andrew Q, the next attackman, added to a group that also now includes Lyle Thompson, Ryan Drenner, and Bryce Wasserman. Noah, this attack core seems to be coming together pretty nicely now for Coach Quirk. He now adds Q. How do you think he fits in with what Quirk already has put together here in the last month?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit surprising to see it come out on Monday, and we were all expecting the waiver wires to come in this week. I mean, it's hard to say what Quirk is really doing. I tried to take every team and kind of figure out what their game plan was with, each draft and the way they're kind of going about things. It's hard to say that the Cannons are going with a youth movement when you draft Brody Merrill and a couple of the other guys they grabbed, but then you go and you grab an Andrew Q. You've got some of these guys that are a little bit younger, and so I think adding a little bit of youth to the attack line. Lyle is obviously the best player in the world, but the PLL is here to stay, and so I think they're taking that opportunity with this entry draft and with all of the luxury that comes with being a new team in a league, and saying, okay, we've got some horses, we've got some players that we can build off of now, but let's get a few guys that keep us up and coming in the future too, so that way 3 to 4 years down the road we're not scraping for some offense and our guys aren't crawling off the field at the 4th quarter.
Ex-NFL football player Chris Hogan, a Super Bowl champion with the New England Patriots, and a guy that bounced around at wide receiver for a few other teams. Former Penn State lacrosse player, he has now been added by Coach Quirk, and it looks like he will be headed to training camp as a member of the Cannons Lacrosse Club. It kind of overshadows the other moves that they made, so we'll get this out of the way. What does Hogan bring to this Cannons team?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing he brings is attention and clicks. That's kind of the obvious thing that people have to kind of get past with Hogan is, did Rabel do this for picks? You know, did he do this so we can get a little buzz generated? I think it's a little bit of both. I think Hogan is obviously a world-class athlete, and he's proven that. I mean, in the NFL, anybody that can even make a roster in the NFL is going to be top of their class in speed, size, you know, whatever attribute you decide. The big question mark is stick skills. You know, I don't want to compare him to Doc Aiken because it's not even a fair comparison. But we saw Doc's leave for a year, and it's taken him a quarter to a half of a season to kind of get back in his shooting stride. Some of his stick skills, things like that, are just a little bit sloppy. You know, I didn't see enough of Hogan when he was in college to have a fair say on how he was and what he kind of looked like. I think the big thing for him is going to be lacrosse IQ. Can he get back in the mindset of, I'm not just running a route, I'm running an offense, you know? And can he bring the stick skills to match that? Because these defenders are the best in the world. If you're not on your game, protecting your stick at all times, and if you don't have that ball moving at the rate that you need to move in the PLL, things are going to struggle. And we saw that ball movement is a huge deal with the chaos last year. If the ball gets stuck in one person's stick, it can be tough to generate any offense. And I get he's a midfielder. You know, it's going to be a little different. He's going to dodge. He's going to do some transition stuff. But either way, they've got way too many just talented pieces on offense to have the ball in anybody's stick too long. And that's one of the things I could be worried about with him. Great athlete, though.
Oh, absolutely a great athlete. Probably one of the best athletes now in the game. Always open, as he likes to say. We'll see if that carries over here to lacrosse. The Cannons made 8 other additions: attackman Bryce Wasserman, John Upgren, and Shane Jackson. Wasserman and Upgren, both former Boston Cannons. Midfielder Luke Anderson, LSM Chase Levesque, a former college teammate of Reese Eddy, and defenseman Justin Pugel, Scott Hooper, and Holden Garland. Pugel and Hooper, former Cannons as well. They now sit at 30 players, which is now that magic number. And we recently learned as well that defenseman Curtis Corley won't be available this season. So let's start with the defense. What do the additions of Levesque, Pugel, Hooper, and Garland add to this defense that might look a little bit like the 2020 Boston Cannons defense, or one of old, with Pugel, Hooper, Merrill, Morocco, and now 6th overall entry draft selection, Zach Goodrich down there?
Yeah, I mean, with defense, I think one of the biggest things is continuity. And I think Coach Cork is being very smart and calculated by bringing in some of the guys that he knows and some of the guys that know him. You know, I think he goes back to kind of using the draft to get some guys that you would take a chance on and you think you could build a team around in the future, but also some guys that you know are going to make sure you're not last in the league this first year, you know. So I think he's done a good job of balancing that, you know, obviously with the guys he's added that have been on his team before, as well as some of those guys that he doesn't have as much experience with. They're obviously proven players. So it'll be interesting to see how training camp plays out, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And I guarantee that everyone who predicts a starting lineup on the first weekend of the PLL season is probably going to get the defense wrong, and is probably going to get a lot of the midfield wrong too, just because there's so much to switch out and interchange. You know, I mean, it's really just gambler's luck to find that starting defense. I mean, the only one that could be really a lock would be Brody Merrill, just because you're not going to draft Brody Merrill and then stick him on the bench unless, I mean, I don't know Brody Merrill, but I don't think he would like that very much either. So I think he's probably a lock, and I think some other guys could make an argument, but honestly, that one's kind of a toss-up to me. I think we're going to know a lot more after training camp, and I think a lot of these training camp vlogs that they're going to do are going to tell us a lot, because we're going to see a lot of, you know, how this plays out. So I'm really excited to see that.
You talk about it being difficult to predict the defense, the midfield for this Cannons team. Let's talk about the attack. Wasserman was the 2020 MLL MVP. He went undrafted in the entry draft, and Coach Quirk able to grab him back and keep him in a Cannons jersey going into 2021, along with the additions of Upgren, Jackson. You know, you got the other attackmen on the roster, Ryan Drenner, Lyle Thompson. What do you think an opening day attack looks like for this Cannons team?
I think it goes one of two ways. Either it goes with continuity, and you see, you know, obviously Lyle's your centerpiece, and you're going to want to build around him. I know he and Shane Jackson have some continuity from the NLL. They've played together in Georgia. So Shane Jackson has a really good chance to earn a spot on this team if he can kind of create and work with him on this. Bryce Wasserman is proven that he can pretty much play with anybody. I mean, he was the MVP of the league. So, you know, when you're looking at a sheet of players, you're like, all right, I got a former MVP. I got the best player in the world. Those are probably our two guys we're going to build around. After that, let's see who works with them best, right? Let's see who's going to complement those two guys, because you don't need another, you know, you don't need another lead singer. You need someone who's going to play off ball, You need someone who's going to make cuts. You need someone who's going to set some picks. And, that could be a toss-up because a lot of those guys are really good at that, Drenner, he's played in so many different spots now. He started with the Whips, he went to the Water Dogs, and he's found pretty good success at both places. So I could see him making the adjustments needed to find. He just grinds. He finds a way to make the starting lineup and be successful. So I could see him being a little, addition piece on that third attack spot. But yeah, I think you're going to be looking for the guy that's going to, help Bryce Wasserman and Lyle Thompson get open, score goals, and take some pressure off them. Because if that's not your game plan, then why'd you draft them?
We will see how this Cannons attack comes together. Moving on to the Redwoods, they landed another goalie with Jack Kelly's future in question. They picked up former Chesapeake Bayhawks goalie Brian Phipps, as well as a third-round draft pick in this year's college draft. In the trade, that sent Andrew Q to the Cannons. Very smart move by Coach St. Laurent, taking Q with what looks to be the fourth waiver pick in St. Laurent, who moved a few draft picks around in acquiring Rob Pennell. He only had 2 selections in the entry draft. He's able to get a mid-draft pick. With the futures of Kelly and Matt Landis in question, Landis being on that military list, how big is this addition of Phipps, and could he challenge Troutner for that starting job?
I think he really could. Troutner was, in 2019, arguably the best goalie in the league. There were a lot of guys that made that argument, but he came onto the scene and never really missed a beat. The bubble he was still decent. He was good, but he didn't bring that, this guy is unbeatable, type of feel to the game. And when you bring in a guy like Brian Phipps, who, he's Brian Phipps, everybody knows his name, his resume, what he's done. I would be hard pressed to think that, this is a competitive league. If you're not contributing now, it's going to be tough for you. So I think there could definitely be some, challenge there. I think Troutner is obviously going to have the starting job to lose just because he's got that experience in the PLL. But the way the season goes, it's a longer season. We're not in a bubble anymore. We're playing week to week. Anything could happen. And when you have one proven goalie and your others are good goalies, but they needed that extra guy for padding that, if something happens to Troutner, he could get hurt. He could get COVID, God forbid, that we're having to deal with that this season. But, having that little bit of padding there on the defense to bring in a guy that you have confidence in immediately, which I think is what Brian Phipps is, that's a really good move. And I think it's one that they needed.
Definitely a great addition by Coach St. Laurent. We'll see what else he can do here as we move along through the offseason. The Atlas, they had 3 players in the waiver wire in LSM Kyle plus a former Denver Outlaw, goalie J.D. Colarusso, and attackman Mark Cockerton. Cockerton played for Rubier with the Boston Cannons, press with Michael Rexroad and Andrew Newbold with the Outlaws. Which of these pickups do you like the best as the Atlas continue this offensive retool? This offseason retool, I should say.
Right. Cockerton is one of those guys that we were all a little bit when he didn't get drafted, we were like, okay, I guess that's the way it's going to go. We're going to have guys that we think should have obviously been drafted that have been around for a while that are going to make it. And we all expected him to kind of get picked up somewhere. I like that he's on the Atlas. The Atlas are going to have presumably Michael Sowers coming in as well when the college draft rolls around. And I think he's another one of those attackmen that can bring some of that veteran leadership. He can bring some, offensive coach on the field type feeling to an Atlas squad that is almost brand new on offense now. They've got so many new pieces in the midfield and even in the attack. They basically took their game plan last year, crumbled it up, and threw it in the trash, and now they're going to go with a whole new offense. And so when you have that, you're going to need some guys who can calm the game down, calm the ball down. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this. They've been in several different offenses. Cockerton's probably been in every offense that's ever been created. So, bringing in a guy like that can help usher some of these younger guys in and get some continuity, I think, is a big deal for Atlas.
Brent Adams for a 4th-round pick in next year's college draft. Seems like an absolute steal if you ask me. What does Adams bring to the table in terms of this Atlas offense and into the transition game?
Yeah, the name of the game in the PLL is speed, and that's what you're getting in Brent Adams. We saw it with the Redwoods. I almost wish they would have used him a little bit more. I think they liked to slow the game down a little bit and use some of their horses at the midfield to dodge from a set offense, in Jones and Perkovic. So I think being on a team that encourages transition, encourages not really making those subs from offense to defense, I think Brent Adams can really benefit from that. And I think we're going to really see, what he can be as an offensive starter in a league that is like the PLL with a shorter field, because he's going to bring several shots a game. And we've been waiting for a while just for that breakout kind of. There's Brent Adams, and he's made some incredible goals, and he's scored some big goals in some big games. So now I'm really excited to see him in a team that he can grow with an entire season, and he's a big part of that offense the entire season, where he gets comfortable and he starts kind of making those moves and learning what it is to be that leading offensive role in the midfield.
In last year's entry draft, the Whipsnakes made out like bandits by selecting 2020 MVP Zed Williams with the 5th overall selection. And it seems like head coach Jim Stagnita is doing something very similar this time around in 2021. Attackman Chris Islanian, defensive midi Charlie Hayes, and midfielder Brian Cole added in the entry draft, and 4-time champ Matt Abbott, the human clear, LSM Alex Spring, and faceoff specialist Kevin Reisman picked up in the waiver wire. Loading back up here for 2021. Which of these moves do you like the best?
Oh gosh, you mentioned, first of all, you're starting at the top, so all of this is just like house money. You're getting better wherever you want to. Matt Abbott, I think, is a really good addition. I know the Whipsnakes last year. I'm not even going to say that their offense stalled at times in 6-on-6, because it didn't for very long. I mean, when you've got the guys that they've got, but sometimes you saw it get wonky and out of focus for a few minutes in a quarter. And with these shortened games, that can mean a lot. So I think adding some of that transition, adding some extra clears. I mean, Matt Abbott's good, like you said, for any clear he wants. I think you're really just adding solid guys that can get you more possessions. And Chris Aslanian, he's going to fill some of those roles at the attack. Again, if somebody gets hurt, you're pulling in a guy with experience. It's just another one of those teams that I don't even know what you say about the Whipsnakes at this point, because they're the team to beat. I mean, they really are.
The Archers, they bulked up in this draft. Head coach Chris Bates said he wanted to get bigger and stronger, and he did just that. Defenseman Graham Hossack taken with the 2nd overall pick. Warren Jeffrey taken in the 3rd round. Another bruiser down low to pair with Eli Gobrecht and Matt McMahon on that defense. Midfielder Ryan McNamara was taken in the 2nd round, and claimed in the waivers was goalie Nick Washuta, now making 3 goalies on the roster. Attackman Nate Solomon and Lacrosse Flash favorite Latrell Harris, a defensive midfielder from the Toronto Rock. This defense now looks very scary on paper. Where do they stack up among the league's other top units, and how do you think Bates deploys this unit?
Yeah, I mean, this was the team that I was the most excited about after all this happened, because when you step back and take a look at a team who the focal point of their identity has been that you've got the best midfielder in the world, and you've got 3 of the most cohesive athletic attackmen in the world, everybody thinks at Archers, and they think they're going to score the ball. And that defense, while it was pretty good, it wasn't ever a real bad defense, kind of got left in, the background and wasn't talked about a lot. And I think that may be what, has kind of cost them those chances in those big games that they get, close semifinals, they get in the bubble. But bringing in a Latrell Harris, bringing in a Graham Hossack, these guys that are certified big-bodied dudes that are going to match up with the best athletes in the world. I think that's huge, because now you don't have to worry about that defense being gassed. You don't have to worry about that defense being a weak spot. If it was, it certainly wasn't the best defense in the league, but it wasn't the worst either. So I think they took the steps they needed to address the spots that they needed to fill, and they did it perfectly with Hossack, with Latrell. I mean, I read up a little bit on his story just because he's one of the funnest guys in the NLL. I mean, it's just crazy, a guy right out of high school getting signed. So that's going to be a fun story, just watching him grow and see how he performs. And then Nate Solomon, he comes in the midfield. He's a Syracuse guy. He's got, some experience. I think he's athletic enough, and I think he's good enough with his stick skills to play in any league, in any game. So we'll see what happens there. He could definitely earn some time. And then the goalie situation, we run all 3 of those by me real quick so we can talk about all 3 of them.
Adam Gittleman, Drew Adams, and then they just added, let's see if I got it, Nick Washuta.
Nick Washuta, right. They were already doing the split time, I believe, with Gittleman and Adams. So you wonder if they're going to kind of go away from that. That was never really, I think, because one was doing better than the other. I think they liked the idea of having 2 goalies and kind of throwing off the shooting presence on the other team, at halftime if they're getting too comfortable. So it'll be interesting. I don't know a whole lot about Washuta, I'll be honest with you. I know, Gittleman and Adams are going to be hard pressed to lose any time in that cage. So I could see there being a little bit of battle, but at the same time, I don't think the Archers are going to have to worry about too much with both of those legends in cage.
We will see how that goalie battle shapes out, and who probably, I would imagine, 2 guys making that 30-man roster, but there could be 3. We'll see how that all plays out. The Archers also released on Wednesday LSM Mike Simon and attackman Davey Amala, freeing up some space as we continue through the waiver period and towards the college draft. Chrome added another former Rochester Rattler and attackman Randy Stotts. He will now join Jordan Wolf and Justin Gutterding down on that Chrome attack. Coach Tim Sudan also grabbed goalie Sean Scanone and midfielder Colin Heacock in the entry draft. And in the waivers, he added defenseman Greg Well and defensive midfielder Ryan Bevel. Coach Sudan talked before the draft of trying to find the heir apparent to John Galloway. And it seems like he has done that with the drafting of Scanone.
Yeah, he was kind of the people's favorite coming out of the NFL, the MLL. He was a guy that everybody was watching last year. Everybody loves him because he's a big presence in the cage, and he seems like he's got a pretty fun personality. And I think he fits the Chrome pretty well because the Chrome are this team that thrive on energy. They thrive on momentum, and they've added the offensive pieces to keep that momentum and keep that energy with Stotts and Heacock. But on the defensive side of the ball, now you've got – and don't get me wrong, Galloway brings a lot of energy. He always has. But I think just having another face in there and another body to lift those spirits if things get down, he fits the bill, and I think they're going to really benefit from not only his skills as a goalie, because he's one of the best goalies that came over from the I did it again, Jesus, the MLL. But he's also brings that Chrome factor where I think he's going to mesh well with a lot of those guys, which is huge for that team.
Noah, I want to thank you for talking shop with me here on today's show. The PLL offseason rolls on. We'll wait and see if we get any more moves, as the college draft has been pushed back a few weeks. April 26th, the new date. Make sure to follow Lacrosse Flash for all the latest news as these 8 PLL teams continue to round out their rosters. 30 is the maximum for training camp. Noah, thank you again, my man. Harrison Silcox will be joining me next. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.